order for Tuesday, June 4, 2019. Thank you for being here. First item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our meeting on 5/7 of this year. Do I have a motion to approve? I have that from Pat Peckham. A second out there? From Mr. Gisselman. Thank you. Changes, concerns, questions? I didn't see any myself, so that being said, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And none are opposed. Thank you. We don't have our, no. So we'll just move on down the line. Number 2, discussion and possible action on the proposed amendment to the development agreement for PI of Schofield, Inc. and Wausau Coded Enterprises 3, LLC. Mr. Schock.
Sure, so thanks. We've just been, our staff has been working to update the development tracking spreadsheet and all the elements of that. We have, there are two, projects in the long list that are, kind of out of compliance. The CGI project, has been out of compliance for a couple of years, but so we wanted to just give an update that we're continuing to work with them. They have a new site leader here at the CGI office. They have renegotiated and renewed their lease with the Dudley Tower. So they, if you've noticed, they have a new CGI sign up at the Dudley Tower now, and they are rolling there. And they're coming up with a proposal for how they plan to, how they see the Wausau Center fitting within the broader CGI world. This has been a transition for them as well. Our original agreement was with Collaborative Consulting. Collaborative Consulting was sold to CGI, and then they've been in the process of figuring out how this center and the, fits within their universe of options. And they went through a couple site leaders who didn't, who either didn't know CGI very well or weren't able to kind of, solidify things. But the new leader is a seasoned CGI employee who comes, to Wausau from Alabama, from one of their larger existing centers. And he's been working on that. So we expect he will be glad to come to the committee, present, kind of their plan when they have that all finalized. We've discussed it, some things in generalities, but there's a few steps that they have to go through, and they have to work on that. So it's something that's on our radar. We continue to work with them, and we do expect to have a tangible proposal from them. The other one that's out of compliance is PI of Schofield, which is the JARP expansion or project. If you remember, we had approved a water line installation which facilitated or was required for the sale of that property away from the Wausau coded property, which allowed JARP to move into that building. And there were some job creation numbers associated with it, which was, part of the plan. They have presented, we were aware that they were not meeting their job creation requirements, and they were aware of that as well, and they informed us that they, changes within their business just hadn't allowed them to, hire up at the same level that they, had expected to. They, play in the oil and gas industry, which is, of course, very, very volatile. So they discussed this, and, in this development agreement, it's very specific about what happens when they miss the job or any provisions. There's a simple clawback that allows them to make a payment to the city, for that. And so what they've done is presented the city with this amendment, basically kind of clarifying that, kind of information, that was in the agreement, and basically kind of offering to make their payment of $20,000 to the city, which is the, which is the clawback. It was a scalable clawback depending on how many jobs they had added. And they have added some jobs, just not the total. So that would be the provision there. So they're, prepared to kind of make that payment, as good faith, and obviously they, they continue to, value that facility and do continue to hopefully expand. They did discuss, their kind of continued efforts there, but they, obviously just missed this, this deadline, which is under the agreement. So it's really for your action, whether you wanted to accept this amendment, which is, kind of relatively short and really focused just on the, on the payment, and this would be their reporting period. I think this ends their reporting period as well, so there's no further, no further reporting required on this development agreement. Again, this was not a project that the city heavily participated on. We, did spend money to, kind of complete the water line, but, that type of infrastructure is an often, it was a needed project to kind of facilitate the sale of that property to really anyone. So, it seems very reasonable, that they have been, accommodating or understanding with what, with what's going on. So, any questions, I guess? The representatives were not able to make it tonight. They were, of course, invited, but something came up and they notified us that they couldn't make it.
Well, if we could first talk about this proposed amendment, I'd like to go back to your initial discussion of the CGI collaborative, whatever consultants that was, because I didn't really see anything in terms of, it's probably there, but the nature of
I'm sorry, yeah, that's under,
nonconformance
it's under updates,
yeah.
the tracking, so I'll revisit that down there if you'd like. I'm sorry to jump ahead on that.
Yeah, you kind of caught me for a loop there.
Yeah, well, we like to keep you on your toes, boss.
All right. Anything from the committee on the proposed amendment change? Ms. Rasmussen?
Thank you. I think that this is a good example of how clawbacks work and why. I think for, years, I would say prior to 2010, we negotiated an awful lot of development agreements that did not have those safeguards or didn't have them as firmly defined, where we could secure the taxpayer's investment in any project by using a clawback clause. And so this was one of the early ones that had it, and recognizing that under a contract, fair is fair, the fact that they're willing to honor their obligation and we know they didn't make it, I think this is a good example of why those should be used, and I think this one's a success. So I'll move that we accept the amendment and the payment.
Very good, thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Peckham, and a comment?
And I had a question. Maybe I missed it in all the wording, but I didn't see how much the city participated financially, and I didn't see what the shortfall was in job creation, and I didn't see them listed in that spreadsheet, so.
Sorry.
Are they in there?
I'm sure they are, but we just have to.
Maybe
the
under
sheet
a
is hard to
pseudonym.
read. Yeah. Hold on. We'll find it for you. So second page, middle of the second page, you'll see PI of Schofield. It was a, TIF 10 funded $125,000 for the water line.
And was the,
And they were supposed to add 30 new staff.
okay, and so where did the 20 grand come from?
So the agreement specified that if they missed their jobs, they would have to pay $1,000 for every job missed, and they've missed it by 20 jobs.
Okay, so this is.
Correct.
Per formula.
Per formula, yep.
Okay, yeah, I agree with Lisa that this is excellent, and that people are being held responsible and, doing the right thing and making it right, so happy days.
Right, it's, it's not in the realm of punitive action, it's in the realm of contractual obligation, and, I'm just glad to see that we have these kinds of things written in. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the proposed amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And none are. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. As I go back to page 1 here, I'm going to shuffle a little bit and jump down to number 6 on our agenda, discussion and possible action on the approval of a planning option for the property at 120 Scott Street. Mr. Schock.
Yeah, so as you know, we had RFP'd 120 Scott, over a year ago. We received a submission, we negotiated a bit, and then we chose not to move forward with it. The developer and the city chose not to move forward at that time. So, but recently we have been approached by another interested party that expressed interest in the property. As you know, also, we're doing a Towers area plan, which highlights some of the, will highlight some of the opportunities for that area. And a firm has come forward and would like to make a kind of short presentation. So the developer is here tonight to kind of overview their interest. And their request is a planning option. As you remember, we've used planning options in the past, most recently I think at the Wausau Club, where we used a model, oddly enough, from Green Bay, the same model that the developer also has used, to, kind of have the opportunity to, work on the site exclusively during a period of time, so they're able to, kind of invest resources to put together a plan, which then they would bring forward in the future, and which seems obviously very reasonable. So I'd like to welcome the developer to come up. And have him give a short presentation on a little bit background on their organization, and then be available for questions if that so choose.
Okay, well, come on, step up to the dais, please. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Just for the record, please give us your name and address, and then go ahead.
Yeah, Brent Dahlstrom. My address is 604 Clay Street in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and I'm here with Merge Urban Development Group. We have offices in both Iowa and in Madison, Wisconsin. My experience as a developer started, my first business was in 2003, quickly got into real estate and really started developing apartment units, single-use buildings almost 10 years ago. And then 5 years ago, just saw really the strength of mixed-use developments and what that can do to strengthen your core, especially getting that residential into areas of towns of this size, which is very similar to my hometown, where maybe a lot of residential has been built on the outside of town, in suburbs, but really just some of these towns got left behind as far as downtown living. And so the Opportunity Zone program came out as part of the tax reform just in 2017. And so at that point, it was kind of a beacon, a call out to developers like myself, and it showed where cities were looking for development in their town. And so this town was one we're looking at. We're doing a project in Stevens Point that's not too far away. That's going to start in July. Want to make a brief presentation, but if you want to cycle through the next page. So our group, merge, it actually means something, and really we're talking about merging many different ways. Our development team is merged of different areas, and our architect, and we all buy into the same idea. And this idea is that these urban cores and making them walkable, bikeable, in places that you want to live and enjoy, and activating that first floor space in a correct way, and not just saying that you want retail on the first floor and leaving it empty, but actually thinking about it, being very transparent and aggressive in looking for tenants, and that's something that's very important to us. And even on this site, like all sites, there's a little bit of a challenge, and one of the things that we've quickly understood is that we really need to connect with some walkways, and maybe on the third or fourth floor, and get it back to that Towers building, and maybe show something like that. So we're already excited. We've already dug into it, but go on to the next page a little bit. On the left, my partner Joy Oneman, she's actually in South Africa right now, so I'm representing us today. Move forward. So experience is something that's very important, and but there's really, the Opportunity Zone program really created the need for three things. And it used to really be where developers came in and you try to find a city, but there's been a new aspect with the Opportunity Zone program. It really requires a capital partner that has a capital gain event, and our capital partner is out of Chicago, so we are Chicago, Madison, and Iowa, and that is Skydeck. And for myself, what attracted them to me was my experience in these sizes of towns, the ones that got left behind. And in '08, a lot of money flew back into, after '08, a lot of money and capital went back into cities, but a lot of that money went into the same cities. So in Wisconsin, you saw a lot in Madison, you saw a lot happen in Milwaukee. In Iowa, we really saw it in Des Moines. But, you know, towns like Stevens Point, Oshkosh, Eau Claire, Wausau, you just didn't see it, right? And they're great towns. It's just that people have chose these larger cities, and Opportunity Zones really bridge that gap to make it so this capital, this size that Skydeck would have, are interested in these tertiary markets. And so the third thing that's important, and we've already had 2 meetings with the city, is to find out if this is something that, generally speaking, that this city would like to see, this type of mixed-use development in the downtown, where we bring market rate housing in more of a scale than maybe is currently seen today. So move forward a little bit. So our process really is, we come to town, which we did, and we were brought to town actually by a local company, and they saw our work in another community and said, hey, would you be interested in taking a look? So we took a look, and then we came back and we said, yeah, we actually found a spot we really like, which is a spot we're talking about tonight. So many great assets, right? You have such a rarity to have all that parking in one area. So we go to a lot of towns and they haven't had the foresight to have a ramp or have that parking, and then the costs are really prohibitive to do a development of this nature when you have to provide the parking and do all the infrastructure that you have already done. So that it really attracted us to the area. On top of that, you have great employment. Sometimes we see the opposite. We see the housing and then the employment second, but you have great office buildings, and it's really incredible to see, and kind of a little secret about your town. So we found the site, so that's what, and then the next, we start talking about deal structure, but the real big step that we want to take is community engagement. So no 2 buildings we design or build are the same, and so we want to fit into the fabric of your city and find out what makes this city special, and we don't know that today. And so we need to talk to as many people as possible. In a recent town in Wisconsin, we spent 2 days and we met with over 100 people at the city, just asking, what are the challenges you have within your housing market, within your office market, within your retail market? And so we asked for this planning option to do that. And after we go through that, then our architects actually draw the building. So we don't start with the building, we start with a concept of what the site could look like, which we have done for this, as far as what the scale could be. But as far as a drawing, that comes later. And so we give an example of what something like that would look like, and it's a similar project that we're doing right now. Moving forward. A lot of times there's a large conversation going on throughout the country of the housing that is needed, right? We need, towns all over need housing that's market rate, but also attainable. And so we have a strategy that we go to do that. We really focus on studios, 1 bedrooms, and then a small mix of 2 bedrooms. And so although our housing is market rate housing, it is attainable throughout various mixed incomes. And we really think that's important, so that the same people that are working maybe as a bartender in the building could live there, but also that a doctor that's just moving to town could live there as well. And so that, we've studied it. We do meet all income levels with our rents, but we are a market rate developer. This is pretty passionate for us. We are built for people. So sometimes we say, this isn't for everyone, right? This is for the people, and they come in all ages and all walks of life that want to enjoy the urban core. I just drove by and saw a long line forming outside your theater for a show tonight, and that you have the beautiful square, and you have great restaurants, some that I've already ate at. And we're talking about the people that they're not as focused daily on the car. They're focused on enjoying what your city has to offer, and it does have some great things to offer. And so we start with people in mind, and then we kind of move out to how you would bike around the site. And then lastly, we do think about how the car is going to get to the site. Now, your site, more than most we ever deal with, has actually quite an incredible availability for the car to get there, so we'll have to think about it even less in this site. But moving forward. Just one of the greatest city planners, in my opinion, of all time, and just a quote that is something that we talk about, and that really people are the same. The things that you enjoy, that most of us enjoy, is we like to gather in public space and enjoy what I was just talking about. So that's what we think about when we develop our buildings. Move forward. These are some different things if you want to know more to the core of what who we are and what we're doing. We do update any project that we're working on LinkedIn and on our website, so that we can so you can have a feel of what we're working on throughout Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, and in the Midwest. So yeah, I respectfully ask for this planning agreement, this exclusive agreement, so that we can dig in and we can commit resources, both just with our team and our architects, to come back in front of you and show you something that I think that your town will really like, and we love that time to do so. Is there any questions I could answer?
Well, this is a really interesting and exciting conversation starter. And Cedar Rapids, did you say?
Cedar Falls.
Oh, Cedar Falls.
Yep.
Because I was wondering about the flooding down there.
We're very close, and we catch the same floods. So it goes from our city down to there. We're not too far away. But this year we're doing okay. In Iowa, we've really hit the western and eastern borders of the state have been hit hard with the rivers on those sides.
Well, I'm sure you've probably shared some of our existing downtown intelligence regarding marketing and demographics and visions and all that sort of thing. So much of what you've been saying so far resonates, I'm sure, with me and probably everybody here. I'll open it up to the committee. Anybody have a question? Ms. Rasmussen?
I have a question, and I guess with regard to a planning commitment, how long of a time frame would you want that site to be held up for that planning process?
Yeah, to put it better, we want to be held accountable for certain steps along the way. So a normal process is really going to take 6 months from day one to actually getting a development agreement that works for everyone, and whether there's zoning and plan approvals. But we want to be held accountable along the way, that we're going to be delivering a rendering and a site plan to you within a certain amount of time, which is really around that 2 to 3 month mark, and then be able to work with that depending on the speed of the city and how they like to move forward. And in Des Moines, that process is really 9 months. And so we really lean on you to say, how long is normal here after we've delivered a plan? So generally speaking, 6 months has been a standard.
I think in general terms, the city reacts to things that it receives very rapidly, I think perhaps more rapidly than most, and I think that we're certainly, receptive to participating in that process. So to, react to that proposal, if we need to hold a special meeting in between or whatever it is, we do that. But I only ask about the time frame because so far, since the initial RFP and the initial project proposal did not move forward, we've not released any new RFP for the site. And as far as I know, there's no lingering interest in the parcel that would cause it to be encumbered in any way anyway. So, if we're looking for a, 6-month window, in my mind, at least as far as I know, that site was going nowhere fast anyway. It's a parking lot today, so.
Yeah, no, I think it fits well with our time. This example that you had provided from Green Bay, the Green Bay RDA was, the redevelopment authority in Green Bay was looking at 6 months as well. It certainly fits well with the time, and it fits, it fits well with our expectations of the Towers area plan as well, because we do want to dovetail, any kind of planning work that this group may do with, kind of the overall vision for the area that the neighborhood planners group is working on as well. So, it seems to fit together well from a timing perspective, so.
We'd probably be interested in broad terms, from projects you have undertaken, how would you characterize the extent of city participation?
Well, it's in Wisconsin and really anywhere, it's an open discussion and it's a dialogue. So the way that we don't like to start with that conversation, and I don't think that conversation is really meant for the beginning. And I think the conversation that we've had with the city is, what are the challenges with the site? What can this development help? Are there certain things that you're trying or you need to do as a city that we could help do? And then later figure out where the gap is. And I don't know where that gap is today, but even in Madison or Des Moines, there's some type of gap, right? So at some point there would be an ask, but it would be something that we'd usually work directly with others or someone that would work with us to say, hey, this is a reasonable one. And I just heard you talk about the clawback, and then that we're held to be reviewed, and that we aren't taking more than that we were supposed to get. So those are all, that's just to be fair, and I hope you understand. I just don't think that that's the conversation I like to have on the front end.
No, but you understand too that, that we would be looking at sort of your history in
Yeah.
terms of, the nature of projects you've undertaken and, what those look like, what did they entail? What did the city bring to the table? That sort of thing. That's all part of the picture that we would be looking at going forward, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And so every city's different. We've shown what we're looking at in Oshkosh and Stevens Point, and we're open. It's public record. Anything that we're negotiating in other cities, we'd be willing to share. It just really depends on where the city is at from a financial perspective, if whether it's pay-as-you-go or upfront, or sometimes it's a combination of both.
Well, we do have a history of encouraging partnership and engaging in projects to the extent that we're able. And and as you heard, like with clawbacks and whatnot, we're very careful about it.
Yes.
No, I'd be very interested to see how this conversation rolls out over time. So, yes, Mr. Martins.
Yep. Excuse me. Since the Towers area plan is an active process, how would this planning commitment kind of fit into that plan because I think that's supposed to be done, in October or November this year?
Yeah, so that's why I thought, it fits well from a timing perspective, because, with your kind of approval, Brent obviously would work closely with, the Towers area planners as well, and they're in the midst of the planning process. They're back on Friday, for stakeholder meetings, as many of you know, and so they're going to be kind of continuing that process. So we're hopeful that their plan and this plan, kind of can move somewhat symbiotically,
Well, is there an expectation then that they're going to both follow the same track, or is one group going to wait kind of to see what the other comes up with? Or
I think they can work together as the process moves, along. Obviously, the Towers area plan would, kind of precede or buttress then any request, because it would kind of enforce, and educate us on what would be the best decision for the site, and then this proposal could follow that.
So just to jump on that conversation, it just high level understanding their process is much like ours, right? Have those stakeholder meetings, which I understand they've already had one, maybe multiple, and that they're having more. So we would consider them one of the stakeholders to absolutely be in conversation with to make sure we're on the same page. But then on top of that, they're already doing a lot and having those conversations that we'd want to have. So we absolutely would want to work directly with them. I think their knowledge would be crucial of what should happen.
Thomas?
Mr. Gisselman.
Well, so then I trust you're seeking, a motion to move ahead?
Sure, I guess, obviously, we wanted to present this, and, they the timeline isn't too fast, but we thought it was relevant and important, and as Lisa had noted, why not, given it's in the overlapping opportunity to do that.
I think this is something that we've been looking at for downtown in cooperation with. So I'll make that motion to move ahead.
You make a motion?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
making that motion. 6 months, is that part of,
I think that's appropriate, but you can decide whatever.
well, with the 6 month,
Would this be
I
subject
think
to
that's an
council
agreeable
Yeah, it would
term.
go to council, yeah.
Do I have a second to Mr. Gisselman's motion?
You got one here and a question?
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Thank you for your interest. I like the ideas that you are sharing today. You used the phrase market rate housing at scale, and you explained what market rate housing is for you, but I'm wondering about at scale. Are you talking 8 floors? Are you talking?
Yeah, so scale to us really means the total size of the project. We're really targeting cities that we believe over, even if maybe if it's 2 phases, that would sustain housing and need housing between $20 and $50 million. So that's the scale we're talking about. So that we do believe that that is this town, but we're looking for scale in that regards. As far as the height of the building, we really like to stick around the 5 stories. And if you go on our website, you'll see that we're doing some that are larger than that. But 5 is a really comfortable level, and it could go into a long conversation about it, but all the famous cities throughout Europe, we're done at that scale. It's a comfortable walk. It's enjoyable. You don't lose a connection with those residents. So the question about scale and height, a lot of times, no promises, but a lot of times we come back with a building right around 5 stories. And then the overall total project size, we'd be looking to find somewhere between that $20 and $50 million mark for a total project.
Ms. Rasmussen?
Thank you. I guess just to clarify on our motion, the only obligation for the city at this point is time, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, I think then it certainly makes sense, because
Yeah.
we've not entertained any other proposal for the site since the original, so.
Correct.
Okay.
But it does give them like some officialdom to have these interviews and talk with stakeholders, whereas without a planning option, they're welcome to come in and start asking about a parcel, but for them to invest time and resources, they want to do it in an official way. So the planning option really is a nice way to do it.
Well, and I think with any planning process, and we've seen it with other things, is you kind of start out by saying, if the money didn't matter, what would you build? And you kind of dream big, and then you back into what you can afford and still get to the same to fill that need. And we've done that ourselves on planning processes here. I think at some point, though, if I put my finance chairman hat on for just a second, I would say the money does matter. And the sooner we know what percentage of participation we'd be looking at, the more of an educated decision we can make. Because whether it's a reverse TID or not, if it involves municipal borrowing, we need to know on the front end so we can plan for that. And, so often, there's always public sentiment and interest tied to the project. And I think whenever your participation grows beyond, 8, 10%, that interest starts to dive a bit. And I think, once we start to flesh out those numbers, if we're looking at somewhere between, just as an example, $20 to $50 million, that's a whole lot of money on our share. Not comparatively, but based on the project size that we normally have an appetite for, we would need to do some advanced planning to accommodate, that type of a request. I think that there's interest. I think there's interest for us already. But, I think as we go forward, we'll have to make sure that we kind of step through it together. But it makes sense to take that time.
And we would sort of be receiving some deliverables along the way in terms of intelligence. So, Mr. Gisselman?
Your being here this evening, will spur, we have media here, so your being here will immediately spur interest. That block has caught, hopefully the imagination of a lot of the citizens of Wausau. So I'm sure that, your being here will present to the city a new opportunity for that block, and we look forward to what's coming forward. Can you speak a little bit about Stevens Point, or is that pretty much just in the planning?
No, that one's very far. So that every step of the way, we received unanimous approval. That project is right around that $30 million mark. It's just on it's the old Lullaby Furniture Factory. So it's about 200, mid 200 units, 29,000 square feet of retail. Please look at the site.
It's on the riverfront, right? Is that the one?
It's not far. It's a couple blocks away. The riverfront's kind of detached from Stevens Point, where a lot of the parks lie on the river, so we're a little bit away from that. But no, we're actually moving dirt in July. So one of the questions about timing is, in our case with this Opportunity Zone program, timing is of the essence. So we are implored and we are asked, we're demanded, in order to take advantage of the incentives that the IRS have laid out, we have to do so in an expedited manner. So that doesn't mean that we rush, but really this project would be one that, it's not going to be one that we dig in 3 years. It's one that we'd want to, as fast as the city could move, and if it all made sense, right? We have that conversation to come as far as finances, but Stevens Point was one where 1 year from when we met, we're moving dirt.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, seeing nothing else from the committee, we have a motion from Mr. Gisselman and a second from Mr. Peckham. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And none are. Well, thank you. Appreciate your interest and welcome the opportunity.
Thank
And
you.
looking forward to seeing
I'm
what
so
happens.
happy I made it. I thought it was at 6, so I really, I'm so thankful I came early. But thank you so much. We look forward to working with the city. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, we'll go back to our original agenda list. Number 3, discussion and possible action on the request received related to rent calculations for the Wausau Center Mall. Mr. Schock.
Sure. So I wanted to talk through, and hold on one second, to talk through some options on this. We have received a bit of a proposal, so I wanted to be sure to agendize it and discuss it, but it didn't necessarily arrive in the way in which we would necessarily expect. Our attorney, received kind of a verbal, had a verbal discussion with their attorney about the site, and so I wanted to kind of go over that and get, kind of have a dialogue with the committee on it so that we could respond kind of as soon as we can. As you know, they are required to do a rent calculation for percentage rent that requires an auditing process, if you will, that is onerous for them, or they view it as onerous because it requires investment of limited resources, which they claim to have, and that's part of the kind of dialogue that's gone on. We approved an extension of that, if you recall, and the staff has been negotiating, with through our attorney with their attorney about some of the elements that we'd like to see, or potentially see in a proposal. And we discussed a variety of things that they could include in the proposal that, they would be able to help clarify or help explain what path they were taking forward with the mall and how they were moving forward on it. They've chosen not to kind of present that in perhaps a kind of cohesive way and request or kind of delineate what they plan to do, even though we have asked that they would do that, because they think that's somewhat important. But they've asked that let me just kind of go through it, that way I can be sure to, kind of relay it. Again, this was not relayed in a kind of formal way, so we don't have like a formal letter of request, per se, that could be agendized. But I think our attorney had summarized the dialogue so that we could at least have a discussion about it. And so they they propose that they would have a report that would be, not generated by a certified public accountant, but that they would generate a report internally and provide that report, to the city. They claim it's an identical report, prepared in accordance with consistently applied accounting principles and certified by the property manager as true and correct. So this would be their proposal to, rather than, request the annual financial statements prepared by a certified public accountant, which is what the agreement states today, they would replace that with this. That's basically what they're proposing. So I just wanted to kind of have that kind of dialogue about it.
Well, in the absence of a formal, written proposal per se for us to act upon, we can't really choose to.
Yes and no. I mean, I guess, I'm not so sure that in our extension, we necessarily delineated what form the proposal must take. And, they have communicated a fairly discrete request. It's not overly complicated, doesn't necessarily need to be mapped out. They have asked for, the change from certified public accountant to a document that is certified by the property manager, and that's, so it's your prerogative, of course. We did kind of push back and ask for a more formal response, but we have not received it to date. Your feedback could be that we need that in a formal sense, although I also understand, and I can appreciate, I think staff appreciates from our perspective that, okay, it didn't detail. We had asked for more detail, of course, and a more robust proposal that outlined some of the things that we'd rather like them to declare to the world, their intentions at the mall. They're not doing that, for better or for worse. I think partly because they don't know answers to those things, or don't choose to disclose them at this time, but they have asked for that discrete change, which would allow them to save for this year the accounting costs associated with the reporting, if we so choose to accept that.
So the sole purpose supposedly is just to avoid the accounting cost.
I believe so, yes, which they have highlighted before, and, frankly, has been a bone of contention, not just with them, but was also a bone of contention with CBL and previous mall managers is, look, the operating margin on the mall is clearly always tight, and, the expense of hiring an accounting firm, to report a relatively small amount of money. Last year, as you know, it totaled $13,000. And I believe they claim that the reporting alone, cost nearly 3 times what the amount paid was. So it's kind of like, well, why, so that's frustrating from their perspective. And I think we can appreciate that, if maybe not have a great deal of sympathy, but at least appreciate the fact that, yes, you're paying a significant amount of money to report a relatively small amount of money in excess cash flow.
Does the committee have concerns about the lack of accountability, perhaps? Ms. Rasmussen?
Well, I guess I won't say concerns. Here's the thing, we're not making much off this report anymore, but this is just yet another example where, we asked for at least some type of a formalized proposal where they would come in and make a legitimate ask that, we could digest and explain to the public, and instead it's, well, we'll have our attorney call your attorney, and a verbal conversation with nothing in writing. And so it
It's
puts us-
frustrating,
it-
yes.
It puts you in an awkward position as well as us, and so, I guess at the very least, I think the committee should expect from them a formal written ask, and at least a sample of this report that they want to give us. If they're going to create a report in-house, and, we're just supposed to say that's okay, because, in-house documents can say whatever you want them to say. So, we know they're not making a ton of money. They have no plan. They've come forward with no plan that's of any real substance that we could participate in. So, my perception is that they're, but for selling the place, they're letting it die a slow death. So, I mean, that's just kind of what our reality is becoming. And, the idea that they, we would cause them to spend $50,000 to pay us 13.
Whatever, yeah.
It doesn't make sense anymore either, but we need something more than what they gave us today.
And it doesn't really cost them anything to have management, the mall manager, put together some sort of outline, summary, sample of what they propose
Yes,
to
I'd like to
present.
see a draft of the report that our finance director could have a look at and see if it's at least satisfactory for her purposes, and a formal ask, rather than this telephone stuff. That's my concern.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Peckham?
Yeah, when was did we put a deadline on the extension that we gave them?
It hasn't gone, well, it was 3 months in addition to their original deadline, and the way in which the original deadline is calculated, is a little wishy-washy because it has to do with their year end and things like that. So, but
We're
yes,
looking at the end of June or something that they're supposed to have us, something?
we were expecting it to shortly, yes, let's put it that way. And now we've received it, to what it's worth. Again, I think, your observations are correct. We were concerned that it wasn't as well structured. Staff provided that feedback already to them that, we'd like to see this in a more formal sense, but, again, this is only a small property in their world, and, their responses are sometimes difficult to.
If this thing is going to turn into a negotiation, then if they're saying that their cost to prepare and pay the rent last year was in excess of $40,000, why don't we just tell them that if they would pay us $25,000, we would be very happy?
Yeah, I guess we can, of course, negotiate this. We have agendized a closed session if you wanted to provide me more, provide staff more negotiation bullets, or you could just simply provide the feedback, I think like Lisa's providing, that you'd like for staff to ask for these elements and, come back with a formal proposal at our future
Right.
meeting.
Would you like to state that in the form of a motion?
Well, I guess a comment first. There doesn't need to be a whole lot of room for negotiation with them. I mean, we have a contract with them, and they have an obligation to us that we've been good enough to hold off on for now. And so if they want to push back on something as simplistic as a draft and a formal ask, that we can at least have a look at before we let them out of the other obligation. The other option is to play hardball and say, no, call your CPA and get our numbers.
Correct, yeah.
So, I mean, realistically, I don't think that the future of this might be a small property in their world, but it's a big one in ours.
Correct.
And the way the lease is structured, we have some leverage on this particular site. And so if they wish to be difficult, we can be difficult too. So, I think the fact that we're having this proactive dialogue is a step in the right direction, but, if they want to, not be happy with our request, we have other options too. So,
Make a motion then?
I'd make a motion that we direct staff to go back to them, request a formal written ask of the amended document type that they'd like to submit to us, and that we would like to receive a sample or a draft of that report that our finance director can review.
Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Martins. Any further discussion?
I would still throw in, I think this is an excellent motion, but I would still throw in a suggestion that if they wanted to just come at us with 50% of what they say it cost them last year, we're happy with that.
Well, negotiation is
win-win.
always, on the table, so. Okay, further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are. Thank you. Okay, that takes us through those items and brings us up to updates, I guess, Mr. Schock.
Oh, very exciting. Okay, so just as to highlight, there's some upcoming meetings that we're coordinating. The South Riverfront Plan stakeholder meetings will happen on Friday and Saturday this week. They're going to be at the farmers market, which is exciting too. They'll have a booth at the farmers market, and they'll be meeting with many of the vendors and folks that attend the market, to talk about that. As you know, the farmers market is a big feature, one of the main stakeholders of the South Riverfront area, so we want to be sure that there's lots of feedback for them to chew on, and they'll be meeting with stakeholders as well. Likewise, they'll be meeting with the Towers area stakeholders, when they're in town as well. Though it's a smaller group, of course, because it's mainly the property owners immediately adjacent to the sites, but they'll be doing that as well, meeting with those folks and stakeholders like the River District and whatnot, to kind of have that dialogue. The River's Edge Master Plan update continues. GRAFE will be in town in June at the summer kickoff event. They will have a booth there, and they will be asking folks for feedback and ideas on, on the River's Edge Trail. And so they'll be, kind of staffing that public booth at Marathon Park during the summer kickoff event. So they're going to be in town and continuing to work on that project. This was started last year, but they'll be, kind of continuing to follow through with it, and we hope to wrap it up, end of this year. We're making a real conscious effort to do some creative outreach and public participation that we probably haven't always done. Some of our big plans, we've had events, as you recall, in the past, or we've had, a showcase event or a, planning workshop event, especially for the East Riverfront Plan and some of the other larger plans. So all of these events going on over the next couple weeks to months, we'll continue that process. We've kind of called 2019 the year of plans. There's lots of plans going on. So those three big ones will at least be in process, they're over the next couple months. So on River Life, we are working to finalize the development agreement based on the term sheet, which was approved. And we're, in daily communication with the development team. They have been finalizing their plans, unit count, and, kind of elevation drawings and stuff like that. We expect that to come to PlanCom in June, in mid-June. We expect to have, kind of a final development agreement in the next couple days to weeks here, because they do obviously plan on starting in June pursuant to the term sheet. So they continue to, to move fast on those steps. And development agreement tracking, and sorry for jumping ahead there, was, we provide the spreadsheet, as we often do, for the annual tracking of, and our staff has been, working with all the folks who have active agreements with the city to determine compliance. And so hopefully it's hard to read in paper form, but in your online document, you can zoom into it, and we can email to anyone who wants to review it as well more closely. Like I mentioned, there's essentially two agreements that are out of compliance. CGI, but CGI has been out of compliance for multiple years now. It was out of compliance last year too, but we've been working with them, on a solution, and I think that actually is approaching it's actually approaching a meaningful proposal or something that would address that. Just to clarify, as Lisa had mentioned, the CGI agreement does not have a specific clawback or provision for noncompliance. So it's you could argue it's a breach of a contract, but what is the damages of that breach of contract? They're not overly explicit, So that's why we recommend that they make a proposal and kind of define what they're looking to do moving forward, which is, and I think they are close to doing that, which we appreciate. And then the other example, of course, was PI of Schofield, which we've now, approved, and it's much easier to set in motion, so.
Very good, thank you. Anything on the updates from the committee? No. All right, discussion and possible action on the meeting schedule for July. Our nominal meeting date would be?
Yeah, so the nominal date is July 2nd, and
I know I will be somewhere in Canada on the north shore of Lake Superior.
I figured it might not work for some. With your patience, it doesn't work for me either. So I was thinking, our staff could support it otherwise if you wanted to have it. But without the boss, that's harder to do. Or maybe we shoot for an alternative day, perhaps July 18th, which is the third Thursday, often our backup, or yet another day, if you have thoughts.
Well, if there are no pressing issues per se, we could hold it off. If there is anything that, we're concerned about imminent action, then, I would be happy to have the committee and staff go on without me. I can always communicate with you on email and, chime in on something and give you my feelings, but that's,
If
Mr.
we
Rasmussen.
don't have pressing business during the month of July, because we're on the one council meeting schedule anyway, so if we don't have anything that needs to be reacted to quickly, could we hold those items for August 6th
Yes, we could.
and just skip July?
Yep.
I mean, if something happens, we could always schedule later
The
in the month,
August
but
meeting is
I'm out of
early,
town on the
so-
18th, which is the only reason I asked.
Good to know.
sage advice. We can always call one if we have to.
If an agreement comes together or something that we need to quick vote on, but if we
Right.
could hold it to the 6th of August, that would probably be better.
Let's shoot for that. It's a summer schedule anyways, and we know that that's a
yeah.
hybrid.
And you just keep your ear to the ground and,
We will, yeah, we'll continue.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, that's okay. We did, I know we've received a commercial rehab loan, but I don't know their timing and, so we'll see. If we do need to have a quick meeting, we could also couple it with a finance meeting or even take one of those actions, maybe even, through finance or something else, like if we needed to. And the finance just falls on those council days anyway, so it's a little easier to
Sure.
to schedule. And so, but we'll watch that closely. Otherwise, we'll plan on canceling the July 2nd meeting, so we'll send out the cancellation notice of that, and we won't schedule another meeting in July unless something changes. Sound
Very good.
Okay.
All right, so we'll put it on the 6th for now and play it
Yep.
by ear. Okay.
Yep.
All right, very good. That being said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved from Mr. Peckham. I have a second where? Do I have a second? There's one from Mr.
Everyone
Martins.
wants to stay.
Thank you, yeah. All in favor, please say aye. 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 We are adjourned. Thank you.